All of us are born with selfhood greatness. What this means is that there are three things. First, we have the drop of God in us, in our souls, the spark of God, the image of God. That gives us all the power we need to do anything. The second thing is we carry the genetics of the most powerful and greatest and wisest people on earth. The third thing is every one of us has a talent that no one has ever had before, that no one has now, no one will ever have again. Each one of us was put here on this earth to do something important to help the entire cosmic organism.
Dr. Bailey.
Dr. Bailey.
Dr. Bailey's Dr. Bailey.
Dr. Joseph A. Bailey II, an orthopedic surgeon, entrepreneur, philanthropist, inventor, Jegna, and author of over 200 books. He wrote medical textbooks, with the one on dwarfism becoming groundbreaking in its research, where his other non-medical works focus on uplifting Black Americans. His literary works are on par with scholars such as Nellie Fuller, Dr. Henry Clark, Ivan van Sertima, and many others. Yet, have you ever heard of the man named Dr. Joseph A. Bailey II? Joseph Alexander Bailey II was born on July 22nd, 1935 in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, to Joseph A. Bailey Sr. and to his mother Angeline. His father was an educator, and around the age of 3, his family, along with his older sister Jocelyn, moved to Minnesota. This was during the time of the Great Depression, and they were very poor.
There were very difficult times in that, a heater on the first floor of the house, a wood stove or something like that, something to heat the house. And he was on the second or third floor, was his bedroom. And it was one of those situations where you put a hot brick in the bed at night to keep you warm.
It was so darn cold and they didn't have a heater. And when it was time to shower, what he would do is he would run up and down the stairs many times, run up and down many times just to get himself tired and warm before he could jump in the shower because it was freezing cold. There was no heater.
So during this time, Joseph got majority of his food from fishing out of one of the many lakes in Minnesota before restrictions were ever put in place. Not too long afterwards, his parents divorced and his mother moved him and his sister to North Carolina, where they primarily lived in Greensboro and Wilson. At this period in time, especially in Wilson, being a part of an all-Black community, it became a great foundation for Joseph's philosophy of life.
The Black community itself was just wonderful. I have never been around people so great as that. There was no homelessness. There was nobody in need of food. There was anybody that was sick. There were always people there to take care of them. We never locked our doors. And everybody was promoting every youth to first have manners and then to be successful for your race. That's what I heard every day. They didn't ask me if I was going to college. They said, "What college are you going to?"
Several of his community members were former slaves.
One of the statements an ex-slave made to me, they didn't talk much, but what they said was profound. For example, she said, Always seek the truth and build all your decisions around it.
As his mother went to work to help support the family and further her education, Joseph was occasionally left home alone. He even spent some time with 3 women named Mama Clara, Aunt Julia, and Aunt Cherry, who were very impactful in his life. The first thing I was taught as a 6-year-old that laid the groundwork setting for common sense about my selfhood greatness was Mama Clara having me do stirrings of a stew. Hence, I was eager because it's something I could do and improve on, regardless of there not being any goal to achieve, because I could be creative in doing it, and because it helped me be a contributor to the family. In reality, what I did was in the realm of useless, and yet it served as a useful dimension in maturing through life. Although Dr. Bailey's mother had to work to help provide for her family, Joseph had nothing but great things to say about his mother and all the lessons that she taught him. It's got a chapter called Mother's Money Management Method. Stop being cheated out of money. Step 1, have to budget. Step 2, never waste money. Step 3, avoid foolish buying. Step 4, wise buying. Step 5, foolish credit. Step 6, wise savings. Step 7, wise debits. And also, be creative. These, among many things, is what Dr. Bailey learned from his mother. As expected from his communal upbringing, he went to college. Joe started his experience at the University of Michigan, which he saved up money to go. Unfortunately, with all the money that he saved by working several jobs, approximately $8,000, but it only lasted for him to attend for 1 year or so at the university. Something interestingly that happened to Joe while he was at Michigan was that he was told that he was not supposed to be a physician. And this is what he wrote in his book. As a freshman at the University of Michigan, I was given an examination to determine what would be my best career choice. Of 150 career items, I scored 149, next to the worst, for medicine. 4 psychologists sat at a table with me and, in essence, said I was not intellectually qualified for medicine and that it was better for me to get an 8-to-5 job. I laughed at them and said, "You all are fools. You cannot measure my determination and drive to be a physician, for this has been my desire all my life." From the University of Michigan, he then transferred to Morehouse in 1955 and was able to pay for school by doing jobs such as being a busboy and from his hobby of doing photography. There at Morehouse, he got his bachelor's in science in chemistry. From Morehouse, Joseph went to Meharry Medical School in Tennessee, where he got his medical degree in 1961. Due to the Berry Plan, which was a Vietnam-era program that paid for physicians' schooling as long as after they finished, they had to join the U.S. military for 2 years. So right after med school, Joe was sent to the Air Force. Then, one night, his commander-in-charge decided to punish Joe due to an incident that happened at a bar.
He told me that he and another African-American friend of his who's also in the military, they were at a bar somewhere in the South. This is back in the 60s, early 60s. And they ordered some drink, and I remember he told me that the bartender said, "We don't serve your kind around here." So I think his friend kind of complained about that, and you know, some problems arose because of that, and that incident went over to their base commander in the military. So he told me, as a form of punishment, at that time, being stationed in the Philippines was not the ideal location to be stationed as a military man. So he told me, as some sort of as a punishment, they assigned him to the Philippines. And knowing my dad, he hates the heat. You know, he cannot stand the heat. And for him to be sent over to a hot, humid country, he told me that he it was hell for the first few months. You know.
Now being in the Philippines, Dr. Joseph Bailey was sent to Clark Force Air Base. He practiced family medicine there, but it was here in the Philippines at Clark Air Base where his interest of orthopedics came into play.
After he had finished his duties taking care of family practice issues, he asked the surgeons who were working on the wounded soldiers if he could help them, because he was all about learning something new. Once he had learned something and become proficient, he was looking to move on to something else. And he was one of these folks that felt that you could never be too prepared for anything. Preparing to prepare is how he put it. So he asked the surgeons if he could help them, and then that is where he became interested in orthopedics.
Instead of seeing 20 people a day as the requirement, I would see 80 because I enjoyed seeing people and helping them to get better. And then, since I was single, I would go and help the orthopedic surgeons with the wounded soldiers flown in from Vietnam, because Vietnam, Clark, where I was the first medical station for the wounded soldiers. So I got a chance to see all of these war wounds and from an orthopedic perspective. That caused me to want to go into orthopedics.
With his newly found interest in orthopedics, Joe got accepted into Hahnemann Hospital in Philadelphia to do his orthopedic residency in 1964. However, even though he was accepted into the program, this didn't mean that they treated him with respect due to the fact that he was a black man.
They gave him all the scut work to do, which was it was difficult for him to learn anything, and that was the reason that they were doing it, because they really weren't interested in showing this young black man teaching him anything. He would walk across town to another hospital to use their morgue for study, because for whatever reason, they made up reasons for that he couldn't use the morgue there at Hahnemann. So he would walk across town and do his study there. We were walking down the stairs one time in the hospital, and he had a number of files in his arms. And as we passed a group of other physicians, somebody nudged him, threw him off balance, and he tripped down the stairs a couple of stairs, regained his balance. He had the files were all over, so I helped him pick them up, and these guys just kept on going. But it was that atmosphere for him was very hostile.
Dark aspects of racism. He told me that there's this one prominent big time orthopedic surgeon. He was just in training, and with that doctor who was so prejudiced that he said, my dad said that he would make my dad mistakes in surgery just to say, see, you're not capable. Instead of telling my dad to say, this is the proper way of doing it, In other words, he would intentionally let my dad make a mistake. And he's supposed to be the mentor, the guy telling him what to do, what not to do, just to discredit my dad. Say, well, you see, your race is not good enough, for this kind of stuff. And it's a well-known hospital. It's one of the top world-renowned hospitals.
But at that time, orthopedics was dominated by white Southerners, and they did not want any black people in orthopedics. And in fact, there were only 9 in the country, and only one was allowed to pass his boards. And so I made a vow to myself that I was going to be the second.
And that he did. Through persistence and drive, Dr. Joseph A. Bailey II became the second black orthopedic surgeon within the whole United States of America. Being a lifelong learner and interested in understanding more about bone defects, in 1968, Dr. Bailey went for his fellowship at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland. He did this to learn more about genetics and orthopedics. Here at Johns Hopkins is where he made his groundbreaking discoveries on dwarfism, dwarfs, and little people.
The Little People of America had their convention in Baltimore, and they all came to Johns Hopkins to be examined. Because I was an orthopedic surgeon, I was allowed to examine all of them. But the other fellows could only examine 6. But they weren't surgeons. They were in medicine. I could also read X-rays, and they couldn't. As a result, I was able to put together what nobody in the history of mankind was able to do, and that was to start unraveling the confusion about the syndromes and put them in order. In other words, at the time I started, there were 9 types of dwarfs known in the world. I had all of the world literature translated and found out that all of it was wrong. And so I would drive up to 500 miles to see one case, and I would go in the hospital, spend 4 days to get 3 cases, and after a while I accumulated all of this information, and then start putting it in order, so that when I wrote my book, which is the classic text on the subject, I wrote on 116, whereas there had been 9 at the beginning.
At some point in his studies was that that dwarves had a malformation of a bone that sits high in the spine, and when their heads are flexed for anesthesia during surgery, it cuts off their respiratory ability, and nobody could figure out what that was, why that was happening. So that was his contribution.
And I also made a discovery that they said was the greatest discovery at Johns Hopkins that year, and that was the reason when they would put these dwarfs under anesthesia to do surgery, many of them would die immediately, and nobody knew why. But I discovered that it was because of the bone that the head spins on, the bone of the neck that the head spins on, was inadequate. Instead of being it was maybe like that, so that when they put their head back, it just shut off all the
Blood supply.
everything to the brain, and they would die immediately. But other people stole that. I won't go into that. But that was stolen.
When he set up his practice here, nobody would hire him. They wouldn't give him a spot anywhere, not in any hospital. He had interviewed long distance to be medical director at Martin Luther King Hospital, and when he got here, they told him that they had changed their minds.
According to his writings, the blacks that worked in the Los Angeles hospital didn't want an outsider leading their department.
But at that time, physicians owned their own practices. So he went around to the orthopedic practices, and nobody would hire him. So they wouldn't give him any patients. So what he did was he positioned himself in the emergency room. He went to one of the hospitals locally, and he asked if he could sit in the emergency room. And as patients came in, if there was somebody who didn't have an assigned physician, because of that, it works entirely differently now, but if they didn't have an assigned physician, would they give it to him? And he would contact the insurance company, if they had insurance, and say, I can give you a report on this in 24 hours. I can tell you what happened. And he would sit there all night and wait for patients to come in. Sometimes none would come in. Sometimes there would be a lot that would come in. But he could be up for more than 24 hours a day, working, trying to get patients. Until he finally had enough patients that he could open his own practice.
And he moved to San Bernardino, and the reason for that is, he said, it's easier, or it was less difficult to open up a practice in this area because this area was still developing at that time. It wasn't as crowded. It was not as fully developed as Los Angeles. He told me this too. When he came here, it was a very racist place. That hospital where he was working, he said that he would sit in the emergency room, I think, or they wouldn't give him any cases, So so he acknowledged that this, even though there's more of a need for orthopedic surgeons here, but it was also hard for him as a man of color, to set up his practice. But he overcame that.
So from hard work, creativity, compassion, and persistency, Dr. Bailey was able to set up one of the largest orthopedic practices that was located on Highland and Waterman in the city of San Bernardino. His practice was right across the street from the legendary St. Bernardine Hospital.
The way he would always tell me is all the doctors would send the patients that they didn't want to work with, they would send them to him. And so he would get the worst patients that the other doctors didn't want to work with. Mm-hmm. But he said it was by far a strain and a work on his mental acuity and his practice. He said, but what he found out is when he started healing the patients, they began to speak of him on a different level. And then he started to get more patients than he could possibly fully work with.
Had a big practice. It was not just orthopedic surgery. It was orthopedic medicine, orthopedic surgery, and orthopedic genetics. So it covered a wide range of folks.
By becoming an expert in orthopedics and being so thorough in his work, the opportunity for Dr. Joseph Bailey to get into workers' compensation arose as becoming an independent medical examiner.
They named me an independent medical examiner for the state of California because I was a world authority in bone defects. So this meant they sent the toughest cases, 5 attorneys on this side, 5 on this side, who all had an idea of what I was supposed to say, which was all different.
Workers' comp, you don't learn that in medical school. So, he told me, I had to learn this from scratch. And, he learned it by trial and error, And I remember his technique was he would write a report and then, either an attorney or insurance adjuster would call him and said, this report's terrible, blah, blah, blah. But he kept his composure. He said, okay, tell me what I did wrong. So, so in that process, he honed his skills as a report writer, and he became, one of the most respected evaluators. In fact, there were patients that would be flown in from other places to see him just for evaluation. That's how well known he was.
Not only did he gain a prestigious reputation among judges and those who were on both sides of the case, but he also created the book entitled The Concise Dictionary of Medical Legal Terms. And the reason why he wrote this book was to help alleviate confusion between doctors and lawyers. By the year 2000, and being involved with orthopedics, Dr. Bailey decided to retire. However, this retirement wasn't going to be focused on taking naps on the beach and traveling the world. No. His retirement delved into what majority of people who know of him now associate with him today. And it started back when he was a little boy in Minnesota, and he saw a neon sign flash across his eyes that said, "Help bright black boys."
We've got to start getting these boys away from the idea of they all want to grow up to be professional athletes. Rarely is that their talent. You know, we're sitting on just genius that can change the world overnight. And that's what we need to be encouraging in our children.
Yeah, he was very passionate about helping young black males because he saw and experienced firsthand the adversity and the challenges of what it means to be a young black male in America. And he knew that exceptionalism is the only way to overcome. That was his core belief. You had to be exceptional. You had to be the best. You had to be best prepared. You had to work the hardest because there are so many barriers and traps set up and designed to dismantle the power and the beauty of young black men.
because he felt, as I feel, your youth uh, and any preservation of us as a people is in our the young black men, you know, that have been disregarded and overlooked. And there was our rite of passage, if you will, and that's what our debates would be about, Dr. Bailey and I. How do we get the black youth, men, to accept their responsibility of who they are?
This is a habit that started in slavery, but it has continued on to the present. I have heard many women tell their sons, "You're going to grow up to be no count just like your no count father." That's a devastating message to a kid. You all are like God. You can't tell your sons anything like that. You just can't do it. Break that habit. Elevate them. Talk about how great they are. Eliminate the negatives. Accentuate the positives.
The way that he was able to do this was by his writings. He started first by writing books about Black and African history to help educate young men and women on their greatness and the greatness which their ancestors have done. This includes books such as Preparing to Prepare, Echoes of Ancient African Values, Good Character, and Becoming a Champion Somebody. His writings and teachings then expands from there. So what is the majority of his books basically about? What would you say? If someone asks.
The black mind. It's about the black mind. It's about early on clearing the black mind and putting out in the information about what you should know about your history. And then how do you think about that? And then what is the black mind, what was done to the black mind? First in Africa, what did they do? What did the colonialists do when they came in? And then what happened to the black mind as they came across? What happened in Middle Passage? What happened when they got to the shores of America or Haiti or Cuba or South America, wherever they went? What was done to the black mind that put them in the mindset they are, that many of them are today?
But his many writings starts from the spirituality all the way up until an utopia of just high intelligence of who we are as a people.
He told me when he was young during the civil rights era that, when there were demonstrations going on, about civil rights, he didn't join them for fear of it jeopardizing his medical career. And so as he got older and, towards the end of his practice, I think that, he wanted to make up for that. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why he has, he's put all of his attention into writing these books that will help, a lot of kids mainly.
His writing for me is a blueprint of what we can use for the future. It's so vast in so many areas.
Yeah. And what do you think the main blueprint is for? Like success, or what would you say the blueprint is for?
My own perception for me, because everyone has their own perceptions on anything, correct? For me, I really truly feel it's a blueprint for survival, because society is so complex that there's many areas that we need to understand in order to survive. And he was setting that pace. He was setting those bricks for us to have a foundation to walk on.
His writings then start to evolve, becoming more sophisticated, with each book reaching up to 600 pages, single spaced. They could easily look like a medical textbook the way that they were presented.
I said to him one time, it must be so awful being you, in the sense that he couldn't stop writing. He couldn't stop putting down what he was thinking.
And his ritual was get up, walk, have a few nuts and berries, have some drink, and then sit and write.
One thing about Dr. Bailey's writings is that they ain't the easiest thing to read.
One page of what you wrote in the black voice, and that's 10 questions, man,
Wow. Tried reading some of his books as well. And I'm a pretty intelligent guy. Sometimes I say, I have to read it 3 or 4 times, just to try to figure out exactly what he was saying. But he is a master of details. It's just amazing. I have never seen. First of all, I've never met, and I don't think I will ever meet somebody as prolific as he was. As far as writing books. I mean, I don't know anyone who has written this many books, period. I mean, look at this books behind me. That's how much there, about 100 or so? I'm not sure. And that's just after, that's not even related to his medical practice.
It's heavy reading, and it really requires thought, heavy thought. And he liked nothing better than a good discussion about just that, about critical thinking, about thinking about thinking.
And his writings are very deep and comprehensive and complete, as they were intended and designed to be. He really wants to stretch our minds. He really wants to challenge those biases that we have developed and picked up along the way and disrupt them with the ideas of our African ancestors and our traditions and love of self and understanding who we truly are. So I think it's a good thing that his writings are dense.
A lot of his writings, I feel, was, and I would tell and share with him that it was a blueprint for the future. A lot of it, I feel, was misunderstood because for me, I felt individuals weren't really at the level of understanding because not quite there yet. And even myself have difficulties at times. But I know in the future, someone along the way will be able to interpret it, what he was trying to share and move it forward.
What I know and have read on his books, it takes it's not an easy, one, it's not an easy read. Secondly, it is, and he and I would have those kind of discussions on the sideline, sidebar, if you will, breaking it down, because he's writing at a high level, and that interpretation of you reading the book and understanding what he's talking about. And if you want to feed that and give it to youth, they have to understand what you're talking about.
Literally, I used to tell him, Dr. Bailey, if you don't let me break this down into digestible bits, we're going to have to wait till you pass in order to be able to provide this information to those who need to get it. You say that's it. No matter what, you can have the greatest saddle in the world. If you never rode a horse, the utility of that saddle is only when you get on the horse. So if you don't know how to ride a horse, if you don't understand the horse, if you don't understand the conditions of bucking and all this other stuff, you may be in for a surprise. Or even if you get the saddle on the horse due to the fact that you've never rode one, the horse already knows the rules and it just goes to exactly where it's been going every time they throw a saddle on it.
What was his argument against or for the denseness?
There'll be a time where they get it. And he can't change his way
Of writing.
Right.
Because the way my dad writes, it's not easy reading. I mean, it's so college level kids are better able to grasp the information that he's put in his books. If you're young and then you're distracted by gadgets, it's not going to sink.
Dr. Bailey even says in his book about the evolution of his writing. I retired early to work on my legacy destination. Despite 35 years of prior research, I could only begin my writings with collecting African tradition definitions and its true world evolutionary history. From there, I dive extensively with what was available into ancient African tradition origins and on up to African American slavery, progressing to the foreground of Black people in the here and now. Halfway up that scale, I realized the metaphysical thinking dealing with icon images of the spiritual, and thus had to switch over to writing in that style. Still, Black people's super brilliant history is largely unknown to them. End quote. However, don't let his large writings discourage you from the wealth of information that are in his writings. Dr. Bailey had just decided that he's going to present the information his way, and it's up to other people to disseminate it from their perspective in a way that they believed others could absorb his information.
He was determined to keep doing it regardless, and it's like saying, I'm writing this, you guys worry about these things, I mean, I'm putting in my soul, my heart and my soul in these books. It's up to you guys, meaning me and Sharon and other people, that's your task, and but the good thing is, I think it's some of his teachings have been incorporated in like at Cal State University in Los Angeles. There's a professor there that has incorporated some of his teachings through the academics there. So that's good. That's a big step. So yeah, and personally, I think if I were to be in charge of everything, I would focus on the college kids and the high school kids as well, and college, because that their path is really moving up. But that's my personal choice. My dad wants to take care of kids that are even younger, but the challenge there again, as far as I'm concerned, is you're competing with gadgets.
Yeah, TikTok.
Yeah. You cannot. I mean, what would they rather do? Play, something, that's fun, as opposed to reading something really, long, but it's for their benefit, but they don't see it that way. It's very short-term oriented, that's how our society has become.
He wrote the books, but he always said, I'm not here to sell any books. Don't care. I'm writing it down so that I have it documented as my research goes on, what I have found, what it has made me think about, what I've been doing. I get it out there. But if you're not interested, well, that's all right.
What was in his books? Depending on the book, it focused on different things. However, The things that he does consistently talk about are his philosophies of life, ancient African history and traditions, spirituality, and a bit of his personal life, which are all seem to be interconnected. His spirituality wasn't based in Christianity or any of the Abrahamic faiths like Islam and Judaism. If anything, his spirituality was about his African ancestors.
I remember he said one time, as a doctor, he said, there must be a God. And I asked why. And he said, well, when I would do my surgery, we'd open up a person's thigh or whatever as an orthopedic surgeon, he saw how intricate and delicate the body parts were, where they were placed. And he said, this could not have happened randomly. There must be a higher being that did this, So that is the most powerful thing that he told me from a spiritual standpoint.
He had a life changing episode when he was whitewater rafting. But in that whitewater rafting, when they hit a patch of rough water and the raft overturned, he was unconscious for a few minutes. And Joe said that during that period of time, it was an epiphany of sorts. He felt that his ancient African ancestors had opened up the secrets to the universe to him. And in that brief time, it was as if his ancestors had poured all of their knowledge into him. Unfortunately, when he became conscious again, he said that it was gone. But he had the remnants of the sense of what they were saying to him, which is then when he began to think about closing up his practice and starting to write.
He needed that George Washington Carver effect. He needed to be alone. He needed to be with his people. And that was that spiritual surrounding that he put himself in. And then they began to tell him what to write. They began to tell him how to propose and to add to those things. And he fought with it. And he worked with it and he researched it and he questioned it. But what he did, which was spiritual, was to let go and to let God.
He was guided, oftentimes he would mention, by his ancestors. He felt he was surrounded by ancestors, so much of his writings came from his connection in spirituality from his ancestors. So that was very vast. So it was a constant communication he felt through them.
He believed in his ancient ancestors and that they constantly were sharing and talking to him that increased his ability to write.
If death is absolute annihilation, then after I die, I will not exist anymore, so I will not experience anything. Also, after I die, even though others will remember me, I will not remember anything. He then goes on to say other things about death. A big philosophy of life that he believed in was the 4 spiritual elements, which were unconditional love, truth, reality, and the natural. Working in these 4 elements were key to his philosophy, key components in life to living a fulfilled, fruitful, Ma'at life. He also was a big component of Know Thyself.
Joe put a lot of time into Know Thyself. And he put a lot of time into knowing himself. And he put a lot of time into trying to understand why he did what he did, and how did that work out for him? How did that work out? And what could he change? He was constantly which is why there are so many papers here writing about why he did what he did, how did that work out, what could he have done differently to get, because if you can't expect change if you don't change what you're doing.
By knowing thyself, here's a quote that he says on page 325. Necessary profound things to learn is to know thyself, i.e., to discover what is natural within oneself and what underlies what is natural about oneself. Such self-knowledge is one's participation in having a direct experience of one's God's likeness spiritual essence, plus with one's God's likeness powers, both being about the what one really is at the spiritual core of one's selfhood. End quote. According to his philosophy of life, he had other concepts like the box concept, ma'at, good characters, keys to success, love platter, tennis racket theory, 6 life duties, and more.
Barriers, Sankofa. Let's see. Oh, self-greatness, no matter what you do. Whether it is, no matter if it's trying to roll, this is a rock, supposedly, and this, of course, is whatever journey you're on, and this, again, shows you can do whatever your goal is. Understand that you are, that you have a selfhood greatness. Classification of people. Type 1, real self, full of heart, always, and a good thinking mind. A heart self, some common sense, has a good head, but not always thinking as well as they should. Type 3, cloud with a silver lining. They have a good heart, but they do have some problems, some dilutions and pollutions, but they still do have a good heart. A clouded heart, dilutions and pollutions of the life.
Can you hold it up a little bit more?
Yeah.
There you go. Just want to get the bottom
Type 5, dark cloud over the heart, and then type 6, dark supernatural world are lost.
Beautiful. With all that said, his foundation for majority of his later work was ancient African tradition. But first he needed to do something that he tells everyone to do.
Black people have never, ever been told the truth about anything. We have never been told the truth. I've had 13 years of training after college. At no time have I ever been taught the truth. At no time have you ever been taught the truth. You may not know that, but you haven't been.
Joe always started off by saying nothing that you have learned up until this point in your life has been the truth. So what you need to do is get rid of all the dilution and the pollution that you have been taught. Otherwise, it's just layering, trying to layer good on bad. You have to get rid, this is what he said. You have to get rid of everything that you've learned as the truth, because it isn't, and replace it with the truth of African spirituality.
Since none of us have ever been told the truth, Dr. Bailey did extensive, very extensive research into African philosophy, tradition, culture, spirituality, and more. In doing so, he developed a library of such things that included psychology, sociology, and an array of dictionaries and encyclopedias. Whether he would admit to it or not, he also became an etymologist, breaking down words and their meanings and origins. One of the biggest African philosophies that he showed and believed in was the me-we philosophy.
Independently, each one of us develops your own talent so that everybody benefits. That's the key. Keep that in mind. We are getting away from that. We're getting away from the idea that we are people that need to work together. That's how we survived. It's now at the point where a black person can see another black person struggling and he'll say, that's not my problem. It is your problem.
The me we philosophy means being the best version of yourself and on your purpose that would, in essence, help the collective.
Africans came into being 200,000 years ago. They never had any jails. They never had any policemen. That's what a wonderful people they were. They weren't against each other. They were helping each other. They cared about each other. They were all trying to get to the same place, the heaven afterlife.
By Dr. Joseph Bailey II diving deeper into African traditions, that meant rejecting and speaking truth to power in regards to European philosophies and mindsets.
My idea of Europeans is not so much a race or a color as it is a philosophy. I divide members of that group into 3 categories. 40% are Satanists. This means that they are directly opposed to anything related to God. They believe in the power of evil. 50% are followers. Whereas the Satanists are evil and dangerous and will never change, the followers are ignorant and dangerous, and they may become more tolerant. The third are 10% humane Europeans who are nice but ignorant and can be misleading. They may incompletely change. What all 3 of these groups share in common is that of a material world orientation. That they think they know what is best for everybody, even about things of which they have no knowledge. Third, they all benefit from keeping black people down. Fourth, they are not about to share their power. Fifth, they are friendly, but never your friend, often trying to find out what you know about that will benefit them and what is needed to keep you down. I have never had a white friend that showed unconditional love. I've never had one. There's always something that's more important. Maybe it's to sell you something, or maybe it's to get something, or maybe it's to take advantage of you, or something. But there's something in there that's for their benefit. Conditional love is used by Europeans to control the children. In other words, they say, I won't love you if you do so and so. Or if you love me, you will do so and so. It's a condition. They would withhold love from a child if that child didn't obey. So these were completely different approaches to how Europeans and Africans dealt with love. Projection is what you are inside that you put on other people. For example, Europeans are very prone to talk about the angry black man. But there has never been a race of people that was more emotional than Europeans. Theirs is in the realm of fear. They fear everything.
When he talks about Europeans, he mostly gets into the mindset of their kill, take, destroy, and where it came from, which is from them surviving in cold climates for thousands of years, and for them having to do what they needed to do to be done, even kill their neighbors to survive. The unfortunate aspect of it all is that their psychology maintained even up till today, even though resources have become abundant.
This country is very hypocritical, calling itself a democracy. It has never been a democracy. Greece was never a democracy. The only true democracy in the history of mankind was in Africa. There have been 67 wars in this country in the last 50 years. I think it's now 70. 70 wars within 50 years in this country. Think about that. You have to have a certain kind of mindset to do that. And what kind of mindset is it? Think about that. Is this something that you want to identify with?
Dr. Bailey also states with the mindset and culture of Europeans, since they came from a harsh, cold environment, that they didn't worship God or nature. No, but instead they made their most fearsome warriors God, along with the animals that threaten and protect them, such as wolves and bears. Dr. Bailey then begins to call these people supernaturals, who create supernatural things that never existed, such as werewolves, fairies, gnomes, trolls, and even Satan, to explain their actions of their daily lives.
By contrast, Europeans don't believe in the spiritual and they don't believe in the metaphysical. They believe in the physical and their made-up concept of the supernatural. This is extremely important to understand. So they have gone on and invented all kinds of people in their supernatural world. Satan is one of them. Hell is another one, and another god, which I won't talk about. Because they have used the gods they made in their supernatural realm and brought them over and said that these are compatible with the African God, the one universal high God, and it is not. But most black people have believed that nonsense. And to their detriment, that's one of the things that keeps us down. That one belief alone keeps us down. We were taught that Greece came up with everything. As I've quickly found out, Greece didn't do anything. They were a semi-barbaric people. They knew nothing. Everything that they exhibit to the world, the Pythagorean theorem and all that. He didn't have a concept of what this was about. He was just writing down African stuff. Aristotle was the same way. Plato was the same way. Every Greek who you heard about, anything they said, it was all African.
Another aspect that he gets into about Europeans is that they are the most fearful of all people on the planet. And since the invention of the gun, they were able to use it to dominate the world and spread their ideologies, all while being either indifferent, hateful, evil, or sadistic.
But Europeans use fear to their advantage. And they make a lot of money off of faking fear. And that comes from this part of their brain. So keep in mind that there are two separate kinds of things going on here. True fear, but the majority of their fear is for their advantage.
But what he found was that most of the Europeans that he met was their philosophy was kill, take, destroy on a lesser level. I mean, it was, I'm all for me, and, the devil to you, be done with you. But he also realized that not everybody was like that.
I admired his connection and his that he had with Sharon, his significant other. That was a very special, and you could see that they were in love. The way that they supported one another.
But there were a few occasions when somebody would stand up and say, if you are so gung-ho for black people and so supportive of the black community, what are you doing with a white girlfriend? I prefer the term partner, but I was his girlfriend. And he would say, you haven't learned anything. What I'm trying to tell you is to look at the philosophy of life that people have. Yes, I do support black businesses. Yes, I do support black students. Yes, I support the black community. But the more important thing is you cannot cut out of your life those people who might support you. And he said, you must understand what a person's philosophy of life is. And that's why you need to read my work. You need to appreciate what I'm saying. He never said you need to read my work, because he said, read it, you take it, you don't take it. He said, I'm not selling anything. I'm hoping you'll learn.
When I first met Sharon, I was warmly surprised. Sharon is one of the sweetest, most supportive human beings that I've ever met. Sharon, you could see very quickly that Dr. Bailey's success and what he's been able to accomplish was empowered by Sharon's support and love for him. Dr. Bailey would not have been the man he was without Sharon's love and support and dedication and contributions to his work, to his life, and to his heart. So, yeah, shout out to Sharon.
A steering wheel is a good thing, and I always saw her as that steering wheel that's trying to take the knowledge that Dr. Bailey is trying to produce, to its respective entities.
Sharon is a godsend because, as I mentioned to you, my dad is not the easiest man to be with, and to this day, I don't know how she's able to put up with him, because he's the Tasmanian devil in the Bugs Bunny is just like I mean, in a humorous way, of course. But yeah, she's there. I mean, I admire her, I respect her, because there's not a lot of people who could really be with him.
Sharon Carosa, or how Dr. Bailey introduced her as Sharon Benjamin, which was her maiden name. She was Joe's partner, student, confidant, assistant, caretaker, and much more.
If she weren't here and I would be the one left to take care of this, I'll be overwhelmed. That tells you how important Sharon is. And I really respect her and admire her, and I thank her for taking care of my dad. When there's nobody else none of his kids were coming to visit. So yeah, they were a good pair.
And I could see she was there really putting in immense work trying to take care of Dr. Bailey and get his books, to get his works, to get his life to the respective individuals in which he wanted them to go.
He's been a soldier and trying to carry on his work. And I appreciate the love affair and the love that they showed one another. And I really respect that, because she made him happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you can tell that connected and then that bond that they have with one another. So that he should have wrote that love story in a book.
Wow. The most interesting thing about their story is that they met in the 60s and had a relationship then.
One of my friends and I were sitting in the cafeteria, and I looked across the cafeteria into the doctor's section, because we had separate eating sections in the cafeteria. And I saw this handsome young man, and we couldn't figure out where he was from. What was his origin?
Okay.
Where was this guy? And he was in great shape, and he had this these white scrubs on, and I thought, son of a gun, he looks like he tailors those, has those tailored. Well, he said no, he didn't have them because he didn't have money. He didn't have 2 cents to rub together. So I saw him, and and I thought, well, I have to find out who this person is, handsome as he is. So he was just as nice as he was good looking. I positioned myself outside his car every day for 5 days until until he would come out when I was there, because there was no way to tell what the erratic schedules were. So, and I just said, I'm standing by his car, and he looked. I mean, anyway, and I said, I really like your car, and he said, would you like to go for a ride sometime? I was like, oh yeah, I would. And true to his word, he said, well, how do I get in touch with you? I told him, call me at the door. Anyway, true to his word, he did call. We did go. He took me out for a ride, and that was it.
Then, as fate would have it, or more so, as they believed, their ancestors brought them back together in their later years.
Joe and I felt the same way, that the ancestors had orchestrated us meeting early in life to say, there is somebody here with whom you will be a perfect fit at some point. We're introducing that person, him to me and me to him. We're introducing you, but then there will be a break, and you will come back together in life when it's important for you to have somebody like this. And so he very much believed, as I believed, that his ancestors had orchestrated to bring me back into his life at a point when he needed somebody who was willing to stand by him, work with him, work for him, do whatever it was that he needed to do, because there wasn't anybody.
Do you know why he started adding you into helping present those lectures?
He was so generous.
Mm.
He was very generous. He was very generous with me, in all kinds of ways. But his bringing me into it was him bringing me into his work, into his life. He wanted me to be part of it. He wanted me to meet people. He just wanted me to be part of that part of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And see what he was doing, get involved. And also so that I would have an understanding of it, because he knew that his family wouldn't be carrying on any of his legacy. And that if anybody was going to be doing it, it would be me.
Mm.
So.
Not only did he write these massive books, but he would write daily for his own page or for publications like the Black Voice News. At one point, he said this about the Black Voice News. For all of my adult life, I have been writing my thoughts pertaining to my problems, progress, and ways to help others. Yet none were organized until I started publishing 3 articles a week for a black newspaper in 1995, which were destroyed by them 5 years ago. Dr. Bailey tried getting his books, even making an endowment to CSUSB for black literature and excellence, but he was denied.
You can't find ancient African information philosophy anywhere. You can't find it. They won't even accept my books in the library of a local university.
He wanted to fund an ethnic studies program and African American studies.
Specifically.
Yes, specifically. And privately, the black professors there wanted it. But when asked by President Morales, there was no support for it. So Joe couldn't get any support for it, and whether or not we don't know what happened between President Morales and the professor, the other teachers, the professors there, because we weren't privy to that. It was only, well, they said, and they said, and they said, and they said. But he said that they felt that President Morales said he felt there just wasn't enough of a call, enough support for it.
Support from who?
Support from the teachers, from the institution, from Cal State, and I don't know if he was talking about the student population, but Joe was talking to the black students there.
Even though his writings were internationally recognized, it was very difficult to find places that would store and house his writings. His writings were so good and thorough that someone even tried to steal one of his works.
I told you somebody came in and stole work off his computer.
Yeah.
And I said, should we get an attorney? What do you want to do? He said, just let it go. Because what his thinking was, it's all right if they took that work because the work was made to help others. And if putting this book out, and then the guy, I think, even had a play made from it locally. If it helps somebody, he said, that's the reason that I do it. Mm-hmm. And if somebody asks him to replicate this work, he won't be able to do it because he didn't do the work in the first place.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't have been the first time that someone has taken or tried to take the credit for Dr. Bailey's work.
When he was at Johns Hopkins working on the, or doing the dwarfism, that work, he didn't realize that until one of his co-workers told him, hey, you better keep an eye on the department head because it looks as though they have got your paper on the dwarfisms and this problem with the bone, and they put all their names on. First was his department chair, and all of the other members never said anything to Joe about it, and didn't even bother putting his name on it. So he had to tell them, make a stink that if you don't at least put my name in there somewhere. So that's how it came out. They did put his name on, but it was the story not only of Joe, but of black people in general who were inventing things and were stolen.
There were several things that I invented, and every one of them was stolen by other people. For example, there was a heel cord stretching brace, and I had a brace man make it, a brace company make it, and found out they had claimed it and published it. So that's the story of my life in medicine. All of my inventions and everything. And that used to hurt me very deeply until I realized the benefit of it. And ancient Africans have an expression that says, you are supposed to take your difficulties in life and use them to bring out the best in you. And that's the law of Harakudi, and that's a fundamental law of the way I live. So what I realized that even though I didn't get credit for these things that I did, the people benefited, and that was my purpose.
With all the issues of getting his work housed and the incompetency of the American schooling system, Dr. Bailey had a vision of starting his own school.
He had this dream. I was probably the first one he told someone about it. It's like a ranch of some kind.
He wanted to have a school. He wanted to have a school of young boys because one thing that we both agreed upon, and that was it's a little difficult to take away someone in their late 30s and 40s, their philosophies. If you catch a youth, whether in their formative years, that is a better approach because you're not going to get the resistance that you would get from someone who's 30 or 40.
Dr. Bailey wanted to get foster care homeless youth, the youngest. He wanted to put them in a very nice living quarters, but put them to work.
But the idea was to get this farm, good land, good water, bring the kids in, and ask for volunteers from the Black community, teachers, all kinds of tradesmen, cooks, and anything like that that would help to put this family together, and then have the kids set up temporary shelters, and then have these young boys build their cabins or their residences or the meal hall or the barns, bring animals in, teach the kids what it was like to grow their own vegetables, fruits and vegetables.
Used to always tell him, Dr. Bailey, you know, your part, I feel, is just to lay the foundation. The building of the school, I feel that through divine intervention, that would be created from future generations. And he used to look at me and just smiles.
The school was intertwined with Bailey's love for nature. The students would primarily be youth from foster homes, orphans, homeless, or children from single-parent homes. He wasn't interested in the adult population or for parents to be involved unless they were fully on board with the vision he had, because he tried educating the youth before and had issues with their retention and also with the parents. Although Dr. Bailey envisioned such a school, it never came to pass due to finding a location, government, the right players, and other factors. Was there like a bunch of pushback from it? Like, what was the?
No, it wasn't so much as pushback as it was familiarity, ownership, control of land, where, just so many different things, that would complicate it just from the movement instead of just doing it. It's pretty hard, with so many moving parts and so many things going on, being able to not only control that, but control the environment in which it exists in.
Gotcha. So was it that you guys maybe needed more players to help?
Oh, definitely.
I can only talk about my regret that I didn't spend more time with him to get some type of blueprint or overview of how to put that into play. Even in his books, there is no, that I have read, there's no blueprint, there's no guideline, there's no how to implement such a school.
Not only did Dr. Bailey have this drive to write down information to teach the next generation and the next generation as a Jegna, he was a father. He had a family.
I don't know much about his family.
He didn't talk much in his presentations about himself.
We never talked about his family.
Has a number of children. They're all, actually out there working, and I don't really have much, there isn't anything I could say about them.
This is back in the early 60s, and he met my mom, who's from the Philippines, while he was stationed there. And I lived there for the first 15 years of my life. And so when I met my dad, I was already 15 years old, actually. And so, the culture that I was brought up in is Filipino, from the Philippines. But I consider myself mixed because, I've lived here since I was 15 years old. I lived with my dad, for a while until I went to college and on my own. So, yeah, my perspective is both Asian or Filipino and African American. My best mentor in life, no question, is my dad.
Although Dr. Bailey was open to discussing topics about nearly everything, especially if they were Afrocentric, speaking about his personal life wasn't an item on the table.
There's something unique about this interview is that I'm putting a personal touch on him as a man, as opposed to most of the people that you talk to probably are, they look at him as more from the work that he's done.
Oldest son, Brian, best, because Joe had a relationship with him, but I don't know anything about the other children. Not enough to say.
His relationship with the other rest of his kids were probably not as strong as with Brian.
That's a good way to put it.
He was married several times and had 12 kids. Dr. Bailey speaks highly about his sister Jocelyn being a musical genius and later advising her to go to med school, which he paid for. He was far from a deadbeat dad, making sure that his children could study anywhere they wanted for college.
I know his true intentions. He just didn't know how to express them. I remember he told me when he was just building up his practice, the first paycheck that he got, the first big paycheck he got was he opened up a bank account for his kids, my half siblings. So that tells you already, where his heart was. But at the same time, the relationship he has with us, with the kids, is not the best because he has there's like a disconnect. And I think that's a function of his upbringing, which he struggled with. And he's a very proud man. He wouldn't accept, or he doesn't want to hear that. So there was that disconnect that we had from a personal standpoint. But I love him as a father, and I understand him. I think of all our siblings, of all his kids, I think I'm the one that understood him the most or the best. What he has achieved is really short of us amazing. But he has his faults, which is mainly from as a family man. But I choose to see him or to understand him because, again, me as an adult, as a family man, it's hard to be perfect. It's impossible to be perfect. Mm-hmm. So, the accolades that he gets from the work he's done is deserving. But there's, he had to pay a price for that. He was too focused on his career, and so, part of his family life, his family life kind of took, it suffered, and which is unfortunate. I think the difference between me and another person close to him is that they probably never saw him in that way. They had expectations of him. You should have been this, you should have been that, But I chose to understand him for, okay, I see why you are who you are.
While he still had his practice, he built a playground next to his home office to be available at a moment's notice. And he would take off every other week to go on family vacations to expose them to things that he wasn't ever exposed to at their age. Even though he did these things, he was an ambitious and driven man with a purpose. Since he was on his purpose, a lot of one-on-one time with his family, the children, was missed.
I could love Dr. Bailey because of Kwame Ture. Because he had to give up his family, he had to give up all this stuff to fight in the revolution. And I was able to sit like we're talking right now and says, Doc, how do you do that? KT, how do you do that? And we would talk and talk and talk and talk. And same thing with Dr. Bailey. How can you do that? And when you see his love for inform, to give, If you see that, you know that it's just innate. It's as bad as a basketball coach that don't know how to go home. It's as bad as Mahatma Gandhi not knowing how to treat his family. It's as bad as Martin Luther King wanting to be there with his kids, or Malcolm X wanting to kiss his daughter on the cheek. But man, revolution is evolution without an R.
His goal was more global, was not just maintaining a nice family, growing up, it's more community oriented.
Bigger purpose.
Yes. So, and for that, I respect him. So, and I accept his faults, you know, family, as a family man, it's fine, telling him why I was able to kind of have a good relationship with him. I said, well, because I see you as a man first and as a father secondly. I used to see you, if I flip that, father first and as a man, then my expectation of you as a father, I could get angry because you didn't do this, you didn't do that, You provided for us financially, but that's it, But when I saw him as a man first, a man has his faults, right? But I also saw the greatness that he has done, not only for himself, he's done well. You see this house, he's got multiple other properties, but I saw, how well he has done considering where he came from.
The place that Dr. Bailey spent most of his time and the majority of his writings was at his home. His home that could easily be described as a mansion. He had it customly built, inside and out, with a room for work and a room for play, so that he didn't have to go outside to do mainly anything else that needed to be done outside. It was built in nature, around nature, far away from any bystanders to randomly approach, and he was located right in the Inland Empire.
Here, somebody told him the land was available. He came up here, and it's like a 360 degree you can see all around. There are no buildings, there's nothing. You can see Colton, Grand Terrace, San Bernardino, Redlands, Loma Linda. You can see all of those from here. And of course, the scenery is beautiful.
And I said, Dad, why the heck are you building such a big house when all your kids are gone and it's just you? It makes no sense. I think it's more of an expression because he got out of a divorce and it was a very bitter divorce, and this is like his expression of, this is me. It's like because for a few years after his divorce, he and I lived in a condominium, it's a very tiny 2-bedroom condo in Colton. So this is like his way of saying, this is me coming out of a divorce, out of a bitter divorce.
Just this house alone was a work in racial justice. Where he lives, he bought that. That's where the Ku Klux Klan would burn crosses on the top of the mountain where he lives. And he bought that property, the 10 acres, raised Rottweilers for 2 years on that property, and then he built his home. And that was a way of removing racial injustice from that area and burning the flag there. So his way of doing things could be silent, but, sleeping gas is pretty powerful.
And it's also a very good reflection of his personality.
Can you explain?
Being away from everyone, sitting on top of a hill, as far away from other people as possible. I told him, Dad, you and I are the same in this way. You just want to be, leave us alone, we'll be, with a nice view. He's big on views. I'm very big on views as well.
Two of the homes that he has that I've been in is that there were books everywhere. He was an avid reader. Any home of Dr. Bailey that you ever set foot in, there were hundreds, if not thousands of books in that house, and African artifacts and a collection of art, and he was very committed to not only collecting African art and artifacts, but books. There was hills of books.
He could swim in the books.
You could swim in the books, libraries. I mean, I think his home could be a complete library on at least a couple of subject matters for sure.
Because this house is like a wind tunnel sometimes up here, you have to put a brick at some of the doors, because if I open a door upstairs, one of the other doors needs to be held open with a doorstop, or it would slam shut. And for somebody who's trying to write and is concentrating, that slam can be pretty amazing.
Got you. In constructing this beautiful home that sits on top of a mountain, the top of the mountain had to be blown off. Explosions had to be taken order. Demolitions had to be blown in order to have a foundation to be leveled for the home to be built upon. Boulders still remain around the house and along the driveway from the explosion. With Dr. Bailey's beautiful home being in such a remote location on top of a mountain, unexpected travelers would end up on the property with harmless and some with not so harmless intentions.
We've been robbed a number of times. That's why I said I was going to put a sign on the gate. Don't bother robbing us. We've already been robbed 6 times. There's nothing left to take. And it's true. Listen, if you want to come in and take it, well, what am I going to do? I will shoot you in the process, but I'm not gonna just stand and watch you come in. But yeah, you enter at your own risk. But really, there's really no reason to take that risk. Oh my gosh, my nose itches. Oh my God. But anyway.
Writing every day, some wine, food, and occasional exercise became Dr. Bailey's daily routine. The wine would help with the chore of having to constantly write down the information that was in his brain. Well, one day, after meeting with an admirer in his home, Dr. Bailey and Sharon went for their usual evening, late afternoon walk. Except this late afternoon, Dr. Bailey fell.
I actually heard about it. I got a phone call. I didn't receive the call. It was on my voicemail. So that's when I heard that he had fell.
And what were your thoughts?
Like, wow, we hear about, our elderly falling. So I was like, wow, okay. Well, I fell one time, and hurt my sciatic nerve. So I know that it can happen, anybody can fall.
I was in my warehouse at my desk, and when I got the call from Sharon that he had taken that fall.
Oh, the fall.
Yes.
Oh, the fall.
Yeah, can we talk about the fall, what it is, what happened, all that?
Well, he had people into his office, into his study that day, and they were talking about him going to speak over at UCR about his work, and he said, "I'll go if Sharon will be part of it." And they said, "Well, sure, that's no problem." And so the people left. And later that day in the afternoon, as we usually did around after we did our exercises, then in the mid-afternoon, I'd take the dog for a walk. Sometimes he would go, sometimes he was too involved in his work. I said, "You want to go for a walk the dog with me?" He said, "Oh, yeah, I think so." And so we went outside, and he was always very conscious about not wanting to make me wait or hold me up. And he thought that he was moving more slowly with advancing years. And so he would get out in front of me. he would get down the stairs as I was getting myself ready upstairs, he would get down the outside stairs, and he started walking down the driveway, because usually I would catch up with him because I just walked a little more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he dropped the leash. I wasn't really paying attention. I know he was ahead of me. And I said, "Oh, but you pick up the leash. You dropped the leash." And he bent over in the driveway, and there's quite a pitch to that driveway. And when he bent over, he lost his balance because of the pitch of the driveway is such that when he bent over, if he had been able to bend a bit more at the knees, I think he would have been able, would have not suffered the head injury that he did. But he pitched forward and hit his head on one of the rocks, the big boulders that line the driveway on the sides, and a big gash on the side of his head, the left side of his head. He asked me not to take him to the hospital. He said, "Don't take me to the hospital." I said, "Take me in the house." I said, "I can't do that. This injury needs to be dealt with at the hospital."
The fall was a severe fall, and what made it so severe was that he hit his head on one of the boulders in the driveway. This fall created a gash in his head that left Sharon with no choice but to call 911. As her experience with being a nurse for many years, she did the best she could to treat the injury while they waited for the paramedics. Yet, during this time, something marvelous happened.
As he was lying in the driveway waiting for 911 to come, because I had left my phone upstairs, as I was coming back to him, he was laid out, and I had put my jacket, under his head. Before I left, I took my jacket off, and bleeding like crazy, and I had gotten some bandages to put on his head. The most spectacular thing happened. I looked over, and I was a few feet away from him, and all of a sudden I heard a crackling noise and then popping, and it was like fireworks, like sparklers, coming up from his body, from head to toe. It was a yellow-white light that came out of his body, and this crackling and sparkling like effects rising up from his body and into the atmosphere. And I really believed that it was the essence of Joe rising to meet those ancestors.
When they got to the hospital, they found out that he had a traumatic brain injury, and he also started to develop internal bleeding in his brain. The notion was at the time that since he was in relatively good health for his age, that he would recover and bounce back. But that wasn't the case.
Sharon called me and let me know that I should come. And I came and I got to see him for a bit. There wasn't a lot of people, just close family. And I know that there were other people coming in and out to visit. And, he just looked like he was sleeping. He wasn't suffering. He wasn't in any pain. He was just sleeping.
Sharon asked me to come, see him. And when I came, I felt upset because I know Dr. Bailey. And I'm like, where's his kids? Where's this, and this? And, I had to be forceful in my way to make sure that his kids were able to see him in the condition that I saw him. And I knew he was. I looked at him and we grasped for one another, and I said, you're going to wake up because I got to go tell your kids that this.
Gotcha.
Oh, he's so pissed at Sharon for letting me know because he knew I was going to go tell his daughter.
Yeah. What condition was he in?
Bad.
Gotcha.
He was on that road.
Gotcha.
And in that road, I think the greatest thing is just letting his family feel their daddy. You know, without him being able to make critical assessment, he was just being able there to being able to see, to breathe, you know, because one of the son-in-law said that I really super love and respect is don't know the journey, man. We love to be able to pick people apart, tell them how good or how bad they were. But do you know the first 20 years of their life?
So when you saw him in the hospital, you were like compelled to make sure that his family saw him.
Oh, yeah. And I ain't care. He knows me. You know, it's going to happen. I love you. We were still, what's happening, man? How you doing? I wasn't talking like, look, oh, my sadness. And oh, my, no, what's up, homie? We getting ready to go through this, huh?
Well, my siblings, not all of us came to the hospital. You know, some are out of state. But again, you know, this tells you the level of love, relationship that we have for him, you know. The closest was not there. So they acknowledged the fact that he was, you know, he was sick and he was, you know, he was in a hospital, but not to the point where, you know, we have to go there. You know, we have to be right by his bedside. That, again, that tells you the level of disconnect that he has with his family.
His health was beginning to decline, and since he had strict medical orders that he wrote down, like no recitation or feeding tubes, but he would allow things like IVs, his remainder here was becoming harder and harder to maintain.
We had already spoken to each other and had written out our healthcare directives and our wills, and they were all in order so that we knew what each other wanted in the event of illness and death. And he did not want, neither of us wanted any extraordinary measures done, and certainly no life-saving measures taken. Anything that would prolong our lives if the quality wasn't there. And he didn't want a feeding tube. He didn't want CPR, none of that. So I already knew that. If it had been up to me, he'd be sitting here in a chair. But it wasn't up to me. I had to follow his instructions because I told him I would. And so he lingered for a week, and it looked as though he was doing pretty good. And he did regain consciousness, but he was never really lucid. And he then developed a bleed, an intracranial bleed on the other side of his head. So that made it more difficult for his recovery. And they wanted to put a feeding tube in him, but because he didn't want a feeding tube, I said no. Of course, his family really couldn't understand that. I said, no, I know what his wishes are, and he doesn't want that. And so we'll have to let him go.
He, lying to us, didn't want to see his kids, lying to us, but he couldn't die until he saw his kids.
And I stepped out of the room, and so I got a call from his daughter, and she said, my dad wants to know where Sharon is. So I said, well, I better get back there because I was there all day, every day for the week because I was so I just wanted to be there should there be any changes, good or bad. And so I was at his bedside, and he sat up, and he had all kinds of gadgets, and he said, "I want to die." I said, "I know you do." He didn't want to live that way. I knew his wishes, and I said, "We're working on that." And so no feeding tube, just giving him fluids and to ease, and then pain medicine. And then he transitioned a week later on Easter Sunday. I think on Palm Sunday. But a week later he transitioned. And yeah. And when he took his last breath, so did I. That's really when the joy of life, the joy associated with him, also died, because he was so many things to me.
Dr. Joseph A. Bailey II transitioned on April 7th, 2023. But his essence remained, and his mission in life that he received as a child with a vision of a neon sign that came across his eyes that said, "Help bright black boys," continues. And that help is being carried on out by his foundation. The Bailey Foundation is meant for organizations whose focus is on helping Black American youth and people primarily throughout the Inland Empire. The foundation was only able to be activated after his death. As his philosophy of life goes, he was always preparing to prepare.
So every year, we're starting this year, we're tasked with giving away a certain percentage of the money that he has in his foundation to whatever charity is deemed deserving of it, and mostly in the Inland Empire. It's not limited in the Inland Empire, from my understanding, but as much as possible over here in the San Bernardino area.
The Bailey Foundation is my purpose.
What's that?
And the Bailey Foundation is a foundation that Joe set up years ago. And again, his mission is to support culturally, spiritually, physically, psychologically, those young men in the Black community as we can.
I want to give Black people the tools needed to take care of themselves, to withdraw from going to white people. They have nothing Black people need, nothing. And I've seen how brilliant they are, and together. And that's what I would like to see come back.
Be yourself. No sense trying to be somebody you're not, because that's too hard to keep up all the time. And to be yourself, you have to know who you are. And that was, one of his foundational tenets was know thyself. Know thyself and be yourself. Too many people wearing masks, and if the mask happens to slip at an odd time, might not be good for you. So, and if people like you for who you are, I don't care if people like me or not. I mean, it certainly is nice. Mm-hmm. But they have to like me if they don't like me, it's no skin off my nose if they don't like me, you know? Certainly is. He said, oh, everybody likes you. Everybody likes you, he said, and you know, that's so darn annoying. And I said, no, that's really not true, but just, yeah, be yourself. You can't go wrong.
Know thyself. And in knowing thyself, you don't point understanding that 3 times more is an understanding when you point. You should understand that 3 times more than the person you're pointing at. Because when you say you shouldn't do something, it's because I have learned to resist that which I ask you to follow me within.
If you know thyself, you can build upon all the good qualities. And that's another thing. He talks about all the good qualities, you know, the positive energy, because you have positive and negative. He always focused on the positive energy of life.
The few days before he passed, and he said, how are you and the dog getting along? And I said, and I thought it was so strange at first, and then I realized what I was asking, and I said, oh, I said, well, we're getting along good. I said, no, she's a good dog. And I said, why? He said, because you will need a companion. Very shortly, you're going to need a companion.
I think I can safely say that you won't meet another person like my dad.
He was one of a kind.
It's one of the biggest things that you learned from Dr. Bailey.
To stay focused, pursue your dreams, pursue your destiny, pursue your journey, no matter what the cost is, to the point that it's important to get the message out if it's inside of you, and to be dedicated toward the survival of our people.
Our best selves, rise to our highest potential. I just keep hearing that over and over, because that was really what his work was about, imparting knowledge and wisdom so that Black boys and Black girls can rise to their highest potential.
And what I admire most about him, though, is his quality of life that he was living. He was living his life on his terms, and very few of us are able to do that.
We sometimes would go there, and I know it because I could talk to other people about it, and they'll look at me and say, "Zooey, Jelani on one," and I would go to Dr. Bailey, and he would just deconstruct the living daylights out of it. And he would think I would be upset because I'm challenging his way of knowing. But like I said, it would like be the biggest hug, the best trophy that I could ever get.
If you have a love for doing something and you really want to help, you'll do it at your own expense. Because, I know, because if you're doing something you love, the rewards will come to you.
Black history all of black people's history has been stolen, and I want to give it back to black people. That's my gift to black people. I want to give them their history back, because if they can see just how brilliant they really are and how brilliant their genes are, and that the best in everything in the world today came out of black Africa, it might make them be something else than what they are.